Well, hello and welcome. I hope everyone is staying cool, and thank you for taking the time to join us. I'm very excited to be speaking with our thought leaders, where I'll be asking them questions about best practices and trends in AML, and with, of course, a focus on the casino and gaming industry. We want this session to be as interactive as possible, and we'll have some polling questions and a Q&A session at the end. Our presenters today are Neil Katkov, a director for Celent, an Oliver Wyman company, and Lisa Price, compliance manager for Seminole HR Support Services. Neil, we'd love for you to take a moment to introduce yourself and Celent to the audience.
Thanks very much, Joe, and thanks for having Celent on this webinar. I oversee the risk practice at Celent. We cover financial risk and operational risk, but a huge focus for us is also financial crime compliance. I've been looking at AML in particular since 2002, and we publish research on the topic as well as assist organizations with their technology challenges around AML compliance systems.
Thank you, Neil. Hey, Lisa, tell us a little bit about yourself and actually that amazing guitar hotel at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Hollywood, Florida.
Yeah, it's quite an icon, isn't it, for a brand? Yes, so I've been with the organization for a little over 20 years. My passion is definitely for AML compliance. The organization does have quite a great reputation as a brand, and that guitar tower is the brainchild of our CEO, Jim Allen. So it was great to see that come to fruition. And stay tuned for future developments like that one.
Fantastic. Main topic for today is obviously Title 31 as it relates to the casino industry, but of course all the banks and money service bureaus and other companies that comply with BSA have similar challenges. Lisa, maybe just from your perspective, what's been the hardest, and you mentioned going from manual to automation, so you've lived a journey, but what has been some of the best practices you've discovered? Any tips and tricks for the audience?
Well, number one, keeping up with the regulatory environment and being proactive, having that to address risk issues and making sure that you can, minimize those risks by practices such as connecting your gaming systems to your AML tracking, making sure in your system constantly, for the most part, to make sure that you've got real time connections and seeing everything. For best practices, in addition to that, is having sufficient resources allocated for compliance. A revenue generating department, but I disagree with that because my approach is a pay now, because if you get hit with a you're going to be paying for it. But if you are proactive and you put in sufficient labor and the technology tools that needed to make your program effective, then you've signified your intent to comply with the regulations and for an effective program.
Got it. Great. Thank you, Lisa. And then, Neil, what sort of trends have you seen in the industry? How companies are using better automation to comply? How are vendors actually trying to keep up with the industry?
Sure. Well, if I can take a little time to take a bit of a historical perspective, the first thing that I would like to mention is that, as Lisa is implying, any organization really needs technology in order to have effective AML compliance operations. And Title 31, to some extent, recognizes this, though it's also largely non-prescriptive about what that technology is going to look like. So for people that are still relying on data in Excel spreadsheets or static reports, this is inefficient. It's also error-prone. But most importantly, you're going to inevitably miss or overlook some of that activity and some of those actors that you should be looking at. So what technology systems can do at a minimum is they'll monitor the transactions. They'll keep track of the entities. So these events and actors won't fall through the cracks. So you've got an eye on them. And that's basically what regulators want you to do. They want to make sure that you know what's happening in your casino or your financial organization. So that's the minimum, but it's then a matter of having good rules and good analytics to maximize the system's ability to identify suspicious activity and those bad actors. And this is where the development over time of the technology really comes into play, is just a constant effort to increase the ability of the systems to be effective. So over the years, the AML professionals in the industry, like Lisa, the technology vendors, like Alessa, and the regulators have, in a sense, worked together to build strong methodologies for AML compliance. And from the technology point of view, let's say matching algorithms, name matching, and watchlist screening is one area that is crucial and seen a lot of development. And then for behavior detection for the transaction monitoring systems, rules and scenarios have also gone under a huge amount of development. And there's a lot of model maintenance work that regulators require around this. They want to see good governance. So this regime, as it were, we might call the first generation of automation in AML. But there is a problem, which is that, as you alluded to, Chiro, these systems still generate large rates of false positive alerts. And working through these false positives is a serious burden for firms of any size, large or small. If you're a big firm, you have more of these false positive alerts and you need a bigger team to handle them. If you're a small organization, you might even only have half of an FTE trying to deal with this. So for a long time, vendors focused on fine-tuning the matching algorithms or the rules to reduce these false positives, but the rates still remain high, and it's really surprising. It's still very typical for solutions to have 90% or more false positives in transaction monitoring. Watch screening has done better. But now there's really a revolution going on in technology. We've got workable AI. And new techniques like self-learning and auto-suppression in the AML context that are, for the first time, starting to get these false positives under control. And I call this the second generation of automation in AML. And we've seen these technologies being able to reduce false positives by 30, as much as 70%. We've heard claims of even higher efficiencies. So new technologies can help with these problems. AML vendors are enhancing their products with them. Now, how are the organizations using these new capabilities? Well, if you're a big firm, especially in financial services, but this also applies to casinos because you have a lot of existing platforms. You have a lot of technology and a complex compliance operation, lots of pieces you have to connect. So it's hard to rip and replace what you've got with some shiny new piece of technology, AI enabled. So a lot of big organizations have internal IT capabilities or internal data science capabilities, and they can use those capabilities to enhance what they've got. Basically, they're updating their system architecture incrementally. For a smaller organization, though, you're actually in a great position to take on one of these new out-of-the-box systems with all these advanced technology capabilities. So, for example, if you're a casino that has yet to put in place your core AML systems, you're in a great position to leapfrog right into a modern system.
Absolutely, the benefits of all the digital transformation that's been going on, especially during COVID. We've actually found ability to reduce false positives by 70% in many of our use cases. Of course, it all depends on the data going in as well, which we'll talk about later. I also find that sometimes as people, as compliance officers think about putting in a new system, there's a little bit of nervousness and, uh-oh, what did I miss with all my years of manual processes, and how do I explain that going forward? So Lisa, you've gone through this journey. How actually have you found improvements in managing the regulation, and do you actually feel like you're still always going to be chasing the puck, as it were, with regulation either changing or maybe the regulators themselves are evolving and asking different questions? So how do you feel?
I'm sorry, Jero. My computer seems to be acting up a little. Think you wanted to know about the improvements.
Yeah, no, overall, I guess in a nutshell, are the regulations actually working, right? You invest all this time and money putting in a new system. At the end of the day, of course, you want to comply, but are the regulations working, after you've gone live with your system?
Well, any changes to the program, including adding in technology, is going to be viewed favorably by the regulator, right? So especially when, the intent to comply is evident. So as far as are the regulations themselves working in regards to the current environment, is that the question?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Okay, so I would say overall, yes, but a little behind the times, maybe. We've got some thresholds that are so old, the CTR, the thresholds, and the SAR thresholds, and there is a working initiative right now with the American Gaming Association in coordination with FinCEN regulators to see if we can't perhaps increase those, because the amount of numbers that are coming through, are growing every day, every year as volumes increase. So the discussions that we've had and asked is, are the current thresholds providing beneficial data to law enforcement and other regulators? So the regulators are looking at potentially increasing that. Then when you talk about online gaming, mobile gaming, sports betting, cryptocurrency, I feel those are areas that the regulators may be a little bit behind, and are, really allowing, if you will, the organizations, casino organizations, to my mind, regulators are taking a back seat before putting any major actions in place, or enforcement, or regulations, in order to gauge how the organizations themselves are, what policies are being put in place to minimize risk, or what areas, need to be viewed more closely than others. So in that respect, the casino organizations have an opportunity to, if they can show to a regulator, hey, this X, Y, and Z is working for us, and the regulator can lean towards adopting something in favor of that, versus the regulators putting something in place, and then the casino organizations need to come back and say, hey, you know what, this isn't working for us, or this is putting a burden on the organization, or even, not addressing the issue at hand. So, in some respects, I think, we're okay with the regulations, but I think there's room for improvement.
Let me ask you a curveball question. How do you actually feel when you do discover suspicious activity and you file it? Are you guys, high five, excited, you got one, hopefully, and then everyone's waiting to see if there's an actual investigation, or it's really more a bureaucratic compliance thing and on to the next?
Well, identifying suspicious activity within a casino organization per the review of the transactions, or using the technology to identify items for review, is critical. It all goes into, identifying risk issues for the organization, as well as providing law enforcement and the regulator sufficient information and to point them in, to look at this, that, or the other, person or organization in order to, reduce criminal activity. So I overall, from a casino compliance environment, it is what it is, right? It's an important part. We feel that suspicious activity, identifying it and filing on it is more important than filing a CTRs. The CTR process, the review process, can be so manually and automated now that we can do more focus for identifying suspicious activity and making sure that our reports are beneficial and have sufficient clarity to what risk issue was identified and or concerns that a law enforcement agency may agree to. As far as getting notification or seeing a link between, a high-profile arrest in the papers to something that might have been filed by the casino organization, I would imagine that those organizations that are able to see that or identify that correlation may take some pride in that, they're doing their part in helping to law enforcement to, get a handle on money laundering, trafficking, corruption, anything and everything.
But it sounds like those instances are not too common. Got it.
Yes, they are.
Oh, they're common. Okay.
I would say those are common. Do look at major news articles, negative news. It's part of our due diligence in knowing our customers. So, we are, looking at online information to see if we, that may be a trigger for us to do due diligence and KYC. And oftentimes those can generate or, end up generating a suspicious activity report for law enforcement.
Right.
Because it's helpful for them to know, hey, there may be another data source of information that they can request. And they may not know that that person was a patron at the casino.
Right. Absolutely. Actually, there's another question. A question from the audience. How easy and quickly can one modify an automated system to adjust to new regulations? There might be new trading rules, or obviously the Russian sanctions were fast and furious. So I guess even whether it's fully automated or not fully automated, change is always a challenge. Any comments from you guys on that?
Well, I definitely agree that, the challenge for addressing an immediate risk can cause some time delay. But, and that's if you have to work within a certain approval structure within the organization. For my mind, if you want to have an efficient and effective AML program, the compliance team needs the authority to immediately implement a policy or procedure that's going to minimize immediate risk issues and concerns while they are adjusting and updating their AML program.
And my comment is that you want technology to make those changes easy to do. So you want capability to configure your rules quickly and easily. You want a flexible system that has the parameters and the data model in place that you can make changes wherever you need them without having to go back to the vendor. And that is going to have a huge impact on how quickly you can respond to changing regulation.
I totally agree. If the systems aren't connected and the program, the tool is not easy to use by the compliance administration to make those changes, to really drill down, then you're not doing your organization any good in being able to minimize that risk.
Well, it's great to have automated systems supported by strong compliance folks. But at the end of the day, if the data you're getting is hard to get, bad data, then it makes compliance all that much harder to handle. So Lisa, maybe slightly very different from banks. Casinos have to get their data from all sorts of systems, whether it's the marketing system to patrons, the credit management system, all the different places where a transaction can happen in the pit, marker at the table. How hard is it for you to get all that information? How many systems are you trying to get data from?
Well, I'd say a good half a dozen. But it depends on the systems that the organization feels is beneficial, right? A great player tracking system can include like your table ratings and capturing, your cash handling transactions as well. Being able to have a great AML technology tool that can link in to all the various systems of the casinos. So like the poker system and the gaming machine system, as well as your player tracking. If the player tracking is robust enough, that's also encompassing like table games and your credit transactions and your overall cash transactions by the cage, then your AML tool is going to be functioning much better if it's able to link to those. Anything that causes someone to have to do duplicative work in entering a transaction into two systems is ineffective. It's not efficient, and there's more chances for errors to be performed, and that causes more work in the after the fact review by the compliance team, because then they've got inconsistent transactions between various systems. They've got to review every system to make sure it's reporting correctly. Comfort that your AML tool that's capturing all those transactions is working as designed, then you can eliminate some of those other duplicative reviews into the other systems. But you still have to periodically check it to make sure that the program is not corrupted and that you're not overlooking or missing anything. Because let's face it, technology is always needing to be updated. And any one time that update can impact the overall programming. And I think that's where a lot of mistakes occur, where there's not a lot of internal testing to make sure that an update's not going to impact negatively anything else that was previously working and cause it not to work once it's in place.
I can go on to talk a little bit more about technology in general and what technology can do for casinos to help them improve their AML compliance. Well, we know that IT is a very big field, and there's a lot we can talk about here. But over the past 5 or 10 years, we've seen the development of, I would say, 4 major technology building blocks in particular that are powering modern AML solutions. And these are APIs, which are really relevant in the casino context, machine learning, NLP, I'll explain that in a minute, and RPA, I'll explain that in a minute too. So I've already talked about how machine learning can reduce false positives. Now, full-on AI can also be used in behavior detection. Alessa actually has that capability. But I'm going to move on to the other areas. And I think one thing that's really crucial if you're not in the banking industry is that AML systems tend to be very bank-centric. Even within financial services, about 90% of the firms using AML systems are banks. It's like a heavily bank thing. That's a function of regulation. Historically, regulation is really focused on the banks. The vendors have followed suit. So it's a challenge to get these systems to meet the needs of non-bank industries like gaming. Now, Lisa, you're talking about the complex systems and the really unique systems that are used in casinos. And like you're saying, it's a big challenge to integrate all these specialized systems with the core AML systems. So modern APIs, those are basically real-time connectors that can support transactions and information communication between all those systems, and put all those transactions into the core AML system are very important. So a modern API-enabled AML core system is going to help a lot to get that integrated view of what's happening in the casino. And one very good use case for this is that modern APIs supporting real-time can enable, for example, modern real-time KYC checks on your customers, so you can get them ready to play right away. So speaking of KYC, natural language processing, that's the NLP I just mentioned. Now, this is a branch of AI, but it's basically the ability to, through a computer or a machine reading capability where the system can read unstructured data sources like adverse media, very important KYC, of course. And it can do this much better than just keyword search, where you have, say, the word terrorist, and it's in the same article as one of your customers. Does that mean your customer is a terrorist? Not necessarily. Maybe your customer's business is, maybe that keyword pops up for some completely reason unrelated to your customer. So NLP can understand the context of these relationships in adverse media, and it can be much more accurate in identifying the risks around your customers and understand the relationships between entities. So NLP-based search can flag, say, not only a high-risk individual accurately, but also understand associates of high-risk individuals, that you might not understand that this customer is associating with high-risk people, or family members similarly. So the contextual understanding of NLP should also be able to help make your KYC searches more accurate and reduce false positives, as in addition to identifying those high-risk people that might be hard to find. For investigations, NLP can automate those labor-intensive searches that you need to do in Google for enhanced due diligence. That can be done completely in an automated fashion now, and the results served up to your analysts. This can save huge amounts of time for your compliance team. Another big burden in AML compliance, of course, is case investigation and reporting. So RPA, which is robotic process automation, can automate those routine tasks, like assembling the case evidence and the analyst decisions into a coherent SAR and filing that with regulators. And that also can have huge benefits for productivity.
Those are great tools for the programming. For the casinos, we've been very limited.
Why don't we move on to online gaming section? So thank you, Lisa. So speaking of ongoing advancements, change, disruption, on the last webinar, there was a question about NFT or non-fungible tokens, and surprised to me actually that there was even this activity on the gaming front. Neil, maybe you could give a short primer on what this is all about and your thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, this is very emerging, and so it's no surprise that if you're a brick and mortar casino, not many of you are going to be working with NFTs, though. You'll see announcements from casinos that they've introduced them. Some of them are, developing their own. And so this is definitely, an area that's going to develop. Definitely more in the online gaming side. And, the online gaming players are, I think all that money is, a lot of it's offshore. and it's a different segment than the casinos we go to and know and love. But still, it's definitely going to affect the industry. So basically, NFTs, they're non-fungible tokens. That means they're one-of-a-kind objects. So they can amass value. And they're a digital asset. They're usually based on the Ethereum blockchain. Of course, blockchain has it's very volatile. It's got its ups and downs, but it's a huge new market. So NFTs, some of them can get really very hot, and they've accumulated huge valuations, basically, because they're selling for a lot of money to enthusiasts. So, cryptocurrency enthusiasts, essentially. So the CryptoPunk NFT sold. There's one of them. This is an early NFT. It sold for $1 million. The first tweet on Twitter was sold by the person who tweeted it, Jack Dorsey, for almost $3 million. Now that purchaser has it on the market for $48 million. So it's an incredible market. There's a lot of areas that have crashed now. So CryptoPunk NFTs, you can get them for a couple $100 now. But it's like collectibles. So as rewards in the casino context, it makes a lot of sense to start with. But like a lot of blockchain tokens, NFTs can be very high risk. Many of them are essentially scams involving pyramid schemes or outright take the money and run frauds, where you put up a website selling NFTs, you collect your money in cryptocurrency and close down the website. Law enforcement is very much on top of this and see it as a huge risk. It's also a risk for laundering money. It's a great way to launder money. You can use illicit funds to buy an NFT for only a short time, sell again, do that multiple times. You can layer your money. Or a group of criminals can self-launder the money by buying and selling it between themselves to hide the original source of their funds. It's really interesting, though, because it's the blockchain. The record of sale is on the blockchain, which is public, and it's permanent. And so law enforcement can go and find those stolen cryptocurrencies, for example. They can trace, and using metadata gathered from other sources, identify the high-risk actors involved in cryptocurrencies and NFTs. But because of this, because it's public, it's very different than fiat currency or any type of financial service or even money flows in gaming. But so because it's public and traceable, the bad actors use really complicated layering techniques involving NFTs with cryptocurrencies as well to elude detection. They might set up thousands of wallets, make small purchases because these, over thousands of transactions again to try to elude detection. As a result, there are specialized vendors that have developed tools that can track all these transactions, and they have high computing capacity to look for transactions of an asset across hundreds of hops, match it with that off-chain data to try to spot the suspicious activity involving crypto or tokens, to identify the high-risk entities on the blockchain. So it's a very interesting area, and it's rife with fraud and money laundering risks. Now, why would a gaming industry, a casino, want to get into this? Because customers love it. And so they are being used as prizes, for example, in sports betting. And as I mentioned, there are also casinos that are developing their own NFTs. Essentially, like everything in blockchain, there's going to be a lot of innovation around NFTs. And I expect in the gaming world, maybe mostly the online gaming world, but there are definitely use cases for casinos as well, because the possibilities are quite limitless. And even in the midst of the current crypto winter, we're seeing a lot of activity and announcements around NFTs and gaming. Now, we hope that most of the NFTs used in gaming will be above board, but still, they do carry a lot of risk, not just around money laundering, but around fraud as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's always the challenge, right? With as innovative as the casinos can be, the bad actors are always trying to be one step ahead. Lisa, do you see crypto being a currency that could be used in lieu of cash?
If there's a way for the organization compliance teams to minimize the risk, to make it profitable, perhaps. I think it's still early days. I think for the most part, casino organizations are just starting to research this as to determine if it's the way that they can utilize. I don't, I know my organization. We've had some internal discussions. Nothing's been determined. It's just early days in research, and I believe the same for the other large organizations that I'm familiar with.
Got it. Thank you. So we have a couple minutes here. So opening up to questions to the audience. Please submit your questions in the chat. So we have a couple already here. So continuing on with the online gaming, not necessarily too much to do with AML, but what are the major pros and cons for online casino gambling?
So for my part, I'd say the pros and cons have to deal again with whether the organization offers their own platform or they utilize a third party. Compliance teams are robust enough to handle that additional component and being able to, not have a negative impact on their current brick and mortar compliance programs.
Well, there's a question: have casino NFTs been very frequent, or is this a rising concern? I mean, Neil, I think you alluded to emerging, so not quite yet a rising concern. Another question here: I'm a bank, but I have a casino as a client. What would be the best controls to ensure the money it collects and makes deposits regularly on its account doesn't come from gamblers linked to people who are trying to launder money? So I guess your client's client question.
Well,
So
speaking of the banking industry, sorry.
no, go ahead, Neil.
I think it's all about making sure your casino client has good systems and processes in place. Because I can't think of, like, an analogy in banking would be correspondent banking, where you're dealing with another bank in another country, maybe that has lots of shell companies as clients. And it historically was difficult to understand the risk of that bank vis-a-vis its, perhaps shady clients. But increasingly, AML technologies or routines are putting in place rules to understand those transactions. But you can do that because they're electronic transactions through SWIFT and things like that. In the gaming industry, that's not the case. So really, I think the banks just have to look to, maybe audit their casinos and due diligence on those customers from this perspective. And Lisa, I expect you have a lot to say there.
I do. I have personal experience with this. I'm the one that always gets the KYC due diligence annual request from the banks themselves and from our bank to, review our program. So it's an annual process, and it also occurs if we open up a new bank account. So what the banks will do is they'll want a copy of your compliance program, your AML program. Who's in charge of that program, all the team members, what are their qualifications? Are they CAM certified? How many years have they been in the industry as a compliance professional? So these are all elements that can, after review by the banking teams in charge of the due diligence and the KYC themselves, those are all elements that will help the bank make a determination as to, what's the risk of this customer and the transactions that they are handling. So if the bank feels that the compliance staff are knowledgeable and skilled and experienced, and that the AML program is robust and the policies, procedures are being followed, and they do get copies of the audits as well for every year. And they look at those all. They'll make a determination as to whether they can keep as a client, and or whether the risk is too great. They may need to terminate that relationship. I think that environment for every customer, whether it's from the casino side or the banking side, is part of the KYC and the due diligence. The casinos are not exempt from that process at all. We are a customer of the bank, and the bank needs to be assured that the risk of doing business with us isn't great and has been minimized sufficiently.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you both, Neil and Lisa, for participating in this panel. I learned a lot myself. Maybe just some final words, Neil?
Sure. So on the poll, my industry perspective, which mostly comes from financial services, missed the mark. But it was really interesting to see how manual the casino industry is when it comes to AML. Now, regulators, Lisa alluded to this, are behind the curve. And really, it's the industry that leads the regulators to recognize best practice. So the regulators are going to look at Lisa's casino and see best practice there. Eventually, they're going to ask you other casinos to do the same thing. They're going to make you put in place technology. Now, you can wait until then. Regulation is the driver in AML technology adoption. Or you can consider that there's a great business case for putting in systems now, because you're really going to realize a huge amount of efficiencies, save a lot of headaches, and head off regulatory risk. So it's good to think about doing it now.
Great. Thanks, Neil. Lisa?
So for me, I think Neil has touched base quite a bit on.
Oh, she may have frozen there. Well, maybe she'll come back. But again, I want to thank both. Oh, there she is. Sorry, we
sorry,
lost,
I thought I was.
Yeah, we lost the last 20 seconds.
Apologies. So again, for the smaller organizations, for casinos, you do yourself a disservice if you're staying manual. I would encourage you to put in your tools. The requirement is use all available tools to perform your review. And if you're not doing that, you will get cited.
Got it. And from my end, again, thank you both, and thank the audience. I just want to remind all of you out there that your work, your hard work, you're actually noble defenders, and by doing your job, you're helping not only to fight crime but help victims. So thank you all. It's more than just checking the box for the BSA Act. And so I'll hand it over to Nikki, and I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you.
So once again, thank you, Jiro, Neil, and Lisa for leading today's discussion and providing great insight into strengthening your casino's AML program. And thank you to the audience for joining us and engaging with the content. This now concludes our presentation.